There it is.
All right, it is now 6:35. And I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, please be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Vaughn,
Yes. Here, yes.
Ryder,
Here.
Loudon,
Here.
Crane,
Here.
Schmidt,
Here.
Carpenter Davis,
Here.
Josie.
Here.
Our first item of business tonight is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now on an item not on our agenda tonight? Please note public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Seeing none, we will move on into Planning Commission action items. We have one item coming forward from the Planning Commission for consideration of a special use permit to operate a dog daycare and overnight boarding facility at 5918 Broadmoor. Mr. Scott, would you please make your presentation?
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Smith alluded to a few minutes ago, we had a planning commission meeting on the 28th of April. And one of the items was application for a special use permit to operate a dog daycare and overnight boarding operation at 5918 Broadmoor Street. And the applicant is Mr. Damon Hicks, who's the owner of Casey Canines, and they're doing business as Playful Pack. That's the name of their operation. And he intends to purchase the property, that's our understanding. And so we have requested that he submit an application for a special use permit, which was before the planning commission, will be before the city council, the meeting on the 16th of May. This property is currently owned by Unleashed Pet Rescue and Adoption and is being operated as an animal shelter. I will kind of stop and acknowledge the fact that that's been a difficult operation over the last few years. There's been a number of issues with state licensing, and we actually had cited them for hosing down animal feces onto the sidewalk and into the street. And that is actually a violation of our MS4 permit, which we have with the state that allows us to operate a stormwater sewer. So animal feces should not be in stormwater sewer. It can be harmful to the environment, harmful to other animals and even people. So didn't want to really conflate the two issues. We kind of wanted to look at that special use permit as a standalone application, but at the same time, acknowledging lessons learned from Unleashed. So with that said, we put together a number of recommendations for a special use permit, some conditions. These all were shared with Mr. Hicks and his attorney and approved by them, so they don't have any issue with any of these. And I will just kind of quickly go through some of these. The property will be purchased and the operator will be KCK9 doing business Playful Pack. The owner operator will be required to get a boarding kennel operator license issued by the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Animal Health. And they'll have to follow all the pertinent rules and regulations outlined by the Kansas Pet Animal Act. And this is really for the overnight boarding side of the operation. So there's some pretty strict rules about how to kennel the animals in a safe way and keeping the environment clean and a number of issues that are outlined in the Kansas Pet Animal Act regarding all of that. Then we kind of get into the issue of the animal feces itself. The owner operator will ensure that the procedures are in place and followed, requiring employees to clean up all animal feces that may deposit outdoors. So this is outdoors. If somebody decides to walk the dog, the expectation is that the employee will pick up after the dog. This also includes the outdoor activity areas, and that again, some things that can wash down into the stormwater system. The owner operator will ensure that procedures are in place and followed for the proper disposal of animal feces in the designated disposal bin. All outdoor activity areas for the dog shall be constructed with a canine grass system or a similar product approved by the city. Such systems shall be constructed to manufacturer specifications and regularly cleaned and maintained according to manufacturer's instructions. Maintenance and cleaning instructions shall be provided to the city at the time a building permit is pulled for installation. There'll be no drainage component that attaches or directs drainage to the city stormwater system. City inspection of the KC9 grass system will be required at the time of installation. Periodic inspection by a city officer will be allowed during normal business hours to ensure that all procedures for cleaning and maintenance are being followed. So I'm just going to stop right there. And this is the current site of Unleashed. So that's kind of that property outlined in the light blue line. On the north side of the building is kind of an asphalt pad area that's fenced in. And that has been an area where they have allowed, Unleashed has allowed dogs to go out and to exercise and get some fresh air. And dogs will do what dogs do when they're outside. And so that's been the issue with them kind of hosing off the area and getting washed out to the sidewalk in the street. Go to the next slide, please. So Mr. Hicks is proposing to use that area, but we've asked him to remove all the asphalt and put in this canine grass system. So go to the next slide, please. And that's the system. So it's essentially like an AstroTurf type of material. So it kind of looks like an artificial grass, obviously. And then there's an underlayment of rock and some other materials. And then that kind of allows any storm water to be captured and just kind of percolate naturally into the ground. So there's not going to be any connection to stormwater sewer system or the sanitary sewer system. Anytime the dog does its business, the employee will be required to clean it up immediately and sanitize the area. Then there will be some routine maintenance, probably vacuuming of any leaves or twigs or anything like that. And then occasionally hose the area down. And again, all that water will just kind of percolate into the ground below. Of course, it'll be open to the air, so you'll get storm water, it's rainfall that occurs. So. And then there'll be some other improvements to the building. The last slide. So he's proposing to paint the building a much better color than it is right now. Put an awning up and then install a 8-foot vinyl fence around that activity area on the north side. So we kind of highlighted those in the conditions. And then that's really about it in a nutshell. We have a few other provisions in here. The Planning Commission did make an amendment to the set of conditions, and they added one more regarding the trash bin. So there's currently a trash bin that sits out in front of the building, and Mr. Hicks doesn't like it any more than anybody else does. So he's trying to figure out something to do. And he's been in conversations with the owner to the north, who owns the plant sub building, about utilizing their trash bin, kind of a joint shared relationship. So the Planning Commission just asked that he continue those conversations, report back to staff, and then work with the owner of that building to create some kind of enclosure around the trash bin. It's just kind of sitting out in the open right now in the parking lot. And so code actually requires that trash enclosures be enclosed and screened. So that was an additional provision that was put into these conditions. And then finally, we're starting off with an initial 5-year term for this. And if everything seems to go well after 5 years, he's welcome to come back and ask for renewal for possibly a longer period of time. So It was a public hearing. We did have one individual that provided some testimony, and that was the manager of Mission Pet Mart, which is located at the corner of Martway and Broadmoor. And I think his was more about questions of operation and, some assurance that they're gonna clean up if there was any issues. And because they've experienced some problems with their neighbor as well. So they just kind of want some assurances they wouldn't have those same problems. That's about it. So this will be on the agenda for the 16th
21st.
or 21st, excuse me.
And the applicant will be present at that meeting.
Yep. Mhm.
We'll go ahead with you. My turn.
Yep. So the PetSmart person didn't have any problems with the perceived competition?
No,
None? He didn't? Okay.
no. They always.
Just a question I have, and this is probably the Department of Agriculture that establishes is how many maximum animals can be kept there at one time? And I was just thinking from the standpoint of the noise in the backyard and, by the businesses.
Yeah, I think frankly, that's probably one of the reasons why he's interested in this location is there's not a lot of residents around. So,
But there's still the other businesses.
yeah, you'll have some businesses in the area. And that was a question that came up, and I think his answer was as many as 35 to possibly 50 dogs. He's gonna do some renovation to the building. So currently the way it's laid out doesn't really configure very well. So he intends to do some interior redesign to allow for better flow of space and to allow for areas we can isolate the dogs, big dogs versus small dogs, dogs that may need a little time out. So some separate rooms for all of those. So he's not quite sure once he does those renovations, how many dogs I can comfortably accommodate, but he's thinking probably 35 plus.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's going to be a good neighbor, so it might be worth his time to talk to Big Biscuit because they have people that sit out there during the day.
Mhm.
Leah and then Ben.
That's a lot of dog business. So sharing a trash with somebody else just seems not like the perfect solution there.
Hmm.
Seems like they need to have their own
Yeah.
away from places because in midsummer, that's gonna be rank.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't really think he's gonna generate a lot of trash, so. Unleashed right now is housing animals on a pretty long-term basis, so there's
That many.
food and bags and all of that. He's not gonna be really doing any of that
No, but like,
to the degree. To the animal waste, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna have to figure out a solution for that. And it probably could go into a dumpster, I don't know, frankly. The challenge of that property is accessibility. So putting a trash dumpster behind the building, there's not really much accessibility back there. So that's why the dumpster's in front now.
I see. And then wasn't there some roof damage to that building? Did they fix that, the current owners?
Unleashed did replace the entire roof system
Okay,
about 5 years ago.
okay.
So speaking to the special use permit application pretty narrowly, this is basically down to the zoning here is M1 general industrial and doesn't allow dog daycare and kenneling. That's why we're here. So the rest of this would be potentially an issue regardless of the special use permit. Is that right?
Mhm.
And then I didn't see on the report, I think the land use plan has this as mixed use. If
Right.
I recall
Mhm.
correctly. Okay. Yeah, I think it's sort of awkward to have this as general industrial, given the way the area has developed. I think the permit application is appropriate. I don't see any reason to not allow, kenneling and dog daycare alongside what's already allowed, especially for this property and how it's been used before. Yeah, I just think, might be helpful in the future if we could get the land use classification on the reports as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm all for it, I think.
Have
has anybody had any experience with the gentleman who's purchasing this? Like any past business he's had, any problems or anything like that? That you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yep, good.
I actually have two questions. One is, there was some, I heard some, how sure are we that this unleashed owner is going to transfer this property, first of all? Because it's my understanding they're still operating out of it. And
Think-
second of all, why, I don't, what was it in Overland Park that they wouldn't let them have the building there?
Well, to answer your first question, yes, Unleashed still owns the property and they're still operating their animal shelter. Whether it's legally being operated is kind of the question right now. That's being determined in the courts. We'll get into that. Mr. Hicks is interested in purchasing the property, but he doesn't want to do so until he gets a special use permit. So he has a conditional offer right now on the property, but if he doesn't get the special use permit, he's not going to purchase the property.
And did the owner say, yes, if you get this, I'll sell it? He
Yeah,
did?
as far as I know, yes. So I imagine the contract has been drawn up and these are the conditions of the contract.
So why did Overland Park say no?
So Mr. Hicks did apply for a special use permit to operate similar operation in a shopping center in Overland Park, and he wanted to have an outdoor activity area kind of behind his store, his location, and it backed up to a residential area.
Oh,
And so I think a lot of the neighbors kind of came out in opposition because of the noise. And so that just kind of,
so this is not going to interfere, I'm sorry. This is not going to interfere with that Planet Sub and that area right in there, the same thing?
it really shouldn't. I mean, yeah,
It
you'll,
shouldn't.
you'll have some dogs barking, but it's no different than cars and
Okay.
other activity going on in the area. So it's,
No other questions?
Anything else? Planning commission items that'll be on our.
okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Alright, yeah. Okay. We don't have any public presentations. Oh. We don't have any public presentations tonight, therefore we will move into our action items. Our first action item this evening is for the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Draft minutes of the April 2nd Community Development Committee meeting are included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Questions, comments, or recommendation?
Recommend acceptance on consent.
Thank you. Our next action item this evening is for consideration of restoration of the indoor pool liner from Penn, Almoney.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the Powell Community Center's got this wonderful indoor pool. And every so often we need to replace the plaster lining. So it's concrete backing. The plaster lining essentially waterproofs and smooths out that concrete so that the water doesn't prevent any spalling on the concrete. So it's been 7 years since the last time that's happened. And as such, we anticipated this replacement, went out to bid, and we got two responsive bidders, two of whom they use two different products, but they're both comparable, relatively comparable. One has got a better warranty and is kind of the industry standard, and one's a lower cost option. And essentially the scope of the work would be draining the pool, pressure washing the existing plaster lining off of the indoor pool, acid washing the concrete so that it's got a nice surface that's able to take a bond coat, and then applying the new plaster. Once all of that's complete, they apply the new plaster and test it for waterproofing. And then it should last another 7 to 10 years. So we do a lot of preventive maintenance to make sure that it does, withstand all the chemicals, harsh chemicals use. People obviously climb out of the pool on the edges. And so there's always that potential. And we try to find solutions so that that doesn't become too big of an issue. But this was part of the 2025 Parks and Recreation CIP plan. And staff is recommending approving a contract with Mid-America Pool for $79,000 in an amount not to exceed $79,000 with funding from the Parks and Recreation sales tax. The reason we're choosing Mid-America Pool renovation is because they have that industry standard, which has got a warranty that's essentially 2 years longer. And so that gets us over halfway of the useful life of the product. And then they back the bond coating as well. Happy to take any questions.
Yep, Sally.
I saw something in the materials that referenced it's most commonly used for unheated pools. With the indoor pool being heated, did they give experience with how it works in heated pools as well?
So I believe when they reference the heating, there's a temperature range,
Oh,
and that's typically applied to the hot tub. Once you get to that
oh, gotcha.
90, 100, 110 degree water body. So it's durable within that 65 to 78 degree range.
And we expect the length of the project to actually fit in within that August closure time.
Yes, we do. Yeah, it's all pretty quick process removing it. Obviously, bond coating is some sections hold a little bit better than others, but yeah, it can come off pretty quickly. And then the application process is 3 to 4 days.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll take a recommendation.
I move that we, do I say something?
No.
No, I move that we accept the recommendation.
On the consent agenda? Yeah.
Oh,
So consent
Okay.
is with the one motion.
Do you want to discuss it again at the meeting or just
Oh,
let it go
no.
on the?
Come on, guys, we love water.
so I get it. We just say everything's consent and then we do one big vote. Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
For everything, always.
Okay.
Unless we want to talk about it or we feel like
Yep.
the public needs to know.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Or have more information.
All right, our next action item this evening is for consideration of repairs to the Rock Creek Trail, also from Penn.
So Rock Creek Trail, I'm sure all of you have been on it at some point. There are certain sections, they get freeze thaw cycle a little bit harder than others, depending on the sunshine and how much tree coverage. But there are several sections that the crack has become far enough that crack fill is no longer an option. We plan on resealing the entire trail after we mill and overlay those sections that are beyond repair, and then crack fill the sections that are an inch or less. And then ultimately the reseal goes over the entire section from Lamar all the way to Barkley. So we reached out to various vendors, McConnell Associates, Bradley's Paving, who most recently did our Anderson Park project, Prime Asphalt, who most recently did our Powell Community Center parking lot, and Paradise Paving, who's non-responsive. And of the three options, McConnell and Associates gave us the option of a 4-inch mill and overlay. And we felt that that was, although it's of the three options, the most expensive, we felt that it was necessary because of the amount of spalling and deterioration. The subsurface just, it doesn't look like it was done properly to begin with. So staff is recommending a contract with McConnell and Associates in an amount not to exceed $53,443. This was part of the 2025 capital improvement project and was originally budgeted as $80,000. So all three bids are coming under that budgeted amount. And we anticipate that this would take place the last week of May or maybe the first week of June, depending on other projects. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Thanks.
The only question I have, oh, did you say?
No, yeah.
Oh, the only question I have is that, is all asphalt appropriate nowadays with heat?
Mhm.
It is, okay.
Yeah, it's very durable. The downside of asphalt as opposed to concrete, which we've installed in our parks, is that it requires a little bit more maintenance. And so it's more maintenance heavy on the front end, but as long as you do that maintenance regularly, then it can last as long as concrete.
Any other questions, comments? Recommendation.
I move that we accept this for consent, to the consent agenda.
Yep. All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
I'm
Our
tr-
final action item this evening is for consideration of the purchase of an industrial sized fan for the Public Works facility from Stephanie Boyce.
All right, I'm going to preface this with, I'm not going to say the name of the company. I'm going to abbreviate it to BAF. In case you've seen the report. So we are, if you remember back in 2024, when we did the budget, we earmarked $30,000 for the replacement of an exhaust fan system in the public workshop. Our vendor came by to assess that and was determined that the existing system was fine and it only needed some routine maintenance, which was a win. And with that said, the replacement was about under $1,000. So it just needed a belt, some greasing, and just some minor maintenance. So considering the savings, Public Works staff identified a more pressing need, and that was improved air circulation in the public workshop, especially in the summer months. Currently, we do not have a fan or any air circulation in the shop, and in the summertime, it gets very, very warm out there, making for uncomfortable working conditions for our crew. And they expressed the need for a fan. And so we're requesting to reallocate the unspent funds for the exhaust system towards the purchase of an industrial fan to improve the airflow and better working conditions. So Josh, our fleet manager, went ahead and reached out to a few companies. He received quotes back from 2 companies, one from BAF and one from Macro Air. You can see kind of the proposals below. They're all pretty much the same size. The Macro Air only has 6 blades as opposed to 8 blades. And BAF has 2 different models, one being the more powerful one with a longer warranty. And so after reviewing those quotes, the installation timeline, the warranty terms, staff recommended purchasing the BAF Powerfoil model for an amount not to exceed $19,426. They've been an industry leader since 1999, committed to performance, durability, safety, and customer satisfaction. They came out, conducted an on-site visit to provide accurate installation quote and advise the staff on the required fire relay switch, and that's in case somehow there's a fire that fan would turn off and not spread there. So although Macro Airs is significantly lower in price, they did not include that fire relay switch within the quote. And so that would increase it about $7,000, making it slightly above the BAF quote. They also can deliver within about 10 business days. Installation is scheduled, would be scheduled before the peak temperatures. And Macro Air's timeline was longer and uncertainty as they outsource it. That would give us some remaining budget still after we use some of those funds allocated towards the overage for the Public Works radios as stated in that one. So staff is recommending the purchase of the Powerfoil model from BAS in the amount not to exceed $19,426. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I think you need a big fan.
Yes.
I move that we accept the recommendation for the consent
Thank you.
agenda.
And that concludes our action items. We do not have any discussion items this evening. Before we adjourn, does anybody have any department updates? Is out there? We'll save them all.
So you want me to wait, Dana?
Yeah, let's, yeah, Penn, why don't you, well, let's go ahead and do them.
So we had 2 department updates for Parks and Recreation. Our summer camp team is in place, hired and fully staffed, which is wonderful, 3 weeks in advance of day 1. So that clock's ticking, trying to get our facility in child-proofing order. And then I don't know if any of you have noticed, but the Mission Family Aquatic Center lap lane pool is filled, which is wonderful to have that done so early. I think some people who enjoy a cold water pool maybe disappointed that it's going to be probably 5 degrees warmer than it was last year at this time. So that's great for those who love some of that temperate water. But we need to hire about 5-ish more lifeguards, but we're in a really good place. We got a little less than 100 team members for the Fish and Family Aquatic Center. So we're excited to open on Saturday, May 24th at 12 noon. Thanks.
All right, I have a few updates. Project wise, we have the 2025 street rehabilitation project. Storm water work is finishing on 61st and 62nd Street, and then they'll do they have another location after that that's behind some properties, and then after they're done, they will move forward with the road repairs. The 2025 Cars project, utilities are continuing to work on their relocation out on 63rd Street. We have the Rock Creek Channel improvements. You may have seen Olson out at the corner over here on Woodson and Martway. They've been surveying the area for that design project. And then back in January, we awarded the pavement markings for the springtime. So we anticipate probably a start date at the end of May, early June. That will be night work. Once the weather gets a little bit warmer, they will start that, and we'll send some communication out once we get ready to move forward with that. Fun side of things, the week of May 18th is Public Works Week, and we are hosting a Public Works open house. Robin has helped with some fun communication, and we're doing an employee spotlight, so keep an eye out and learn more about all of our Public Works employee staff. Which we extended an offer to the last open position, and he's accepted. So we're just going through background check, and then we'll be fully staffed. So that's exciting as well. And then today, Brent and I attended a transportation symposium hosted by Burns and McDonnell. They're one of our on-call consultants, and also the firm that recently was awarded our contract for the Safe Streets and Roads for All project. And this event brought together city staff, elected officials, engineers, planners, and individuals with mobility impairments to explore key topics, improving safety for vulnerable road users. Discussions focused on the VRU safety and accessibility throughout all project phases, from planning through construction. Emphasis was placed on the importance of collaboration with agencies like MARC, Bike Walk KC, KDOT, as well as the value of utilizing tools such as our Safe Streets and All studies, which right now we're currently going through. One major takeaway was the recognition that we often lack a full understanding of the needs of those who are visually and or mobility impaired. So we did have a speaker that was visually impaired and works for an organization locally here in Kansas City called The Whole Person. And it was really neat just to hear her story and what she goes through, especially their location is on Main Street going through the KC streetcar project. And so she was able to share some of the stories that she's had to go through when trying to navigate getting to work through a construction project. And then another key insight was the importance of bridging the gap between planning and engineering. This is something we're actively working on in the city as we aim to be more intentional and collaborate across departments and use plans and available resources to shape our future projects. So it was a really insightful and fun-filled day at Burns and McDonnell. And if you've never been to their campus, it's amazing. So that's what I have. Yes.
Could you remind us of the date and the time of the Public Works open house?
Yes. Thank you. And I'll send out an invitation to, it is May 22nd. That's Thursday. Yes, Thursday, from 5 to 7, and it's at our Public Works facility.
PM, right?
5 a.m.
Yeah, dedicated.
Nobody will be there at 5 a.m.
I actually have a couple announcements tonight. So we have hired 2 new employees in the last few weeks. Ms. Lauren Galvin is our new administrative assistant / permit tech. She's a young lady sitting at the window. You come into City Hall during the day. And then we hired a new building official, Courtney Capello. He started Monday this week, or actually last week. So the second week. So he comes with us from 30 years of experience with Sedgwick County, Wichita, Kansas. And he retired from there a few years ago. Has been working for Casey Mo for the last couple of years. His family lives in the area. So we kind of drew him up to Kansas City and saw an opportunity to work with us and took advantage of it. We took advantage of him. So we're glad to have him aboard, both of them actually. And then I did extend an offer this week to an applicant for the planner position. So we're in the process of kind of negotiating terms on that. Hopefully that individual will accept. And then lastly, on May 1st, we launched our permitting and licensing software. It's GovBuild. So now no more paper, no more paper plans. Everything's gonna be digital. We've been kind of, learning the system, sort of working out a few kinks we found along the way, but I think it's generally been well accepted by all the staff and even some of the applicants that got in there and actually submitted plans. And so this coffee's gone now, but Millhouse plans to submit plans in the next week or so. I was talking with their architect this afternoon. So that'll be the first big project that gets submitted through the portal. It'll be all digital. So, yep.
Will all the old plans we have for numerous years, will they be integrated into the new system electronically, or will they just stay like they are and then we start from this point on?
Probably start from this point going forward. So we have a lot of digital plans from the last few years. But yeah, we have stacks of old plans going back 20 years or so upstairs in the attic. So we looked at digitizing those, but it was pretty expensive. So. All right, thank you.
Is that all the updates? All right. It is now 7:12 PM and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you.
Sure. Just let me know. What time even is it? 7:17. Okay. It is now 7:17 PM. And
I'm talking.
Are we rolling?
okay, we're going to try again. It is now 7:17 PM, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Vaughn. Loudon. Here. Ryard.
Here.
Pring. Here. Schmidt.
Here.
Carpenter Davis. Here. Josie.
Here.
Our first item of business tonight is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now on an item not on our agenda tonight? Please note, public comments are limited to 3 minutes. I do not see anyone in person, and we have no one online who'd like to speak, so we will move on. We do not have any public presentations this evening, therefore we'll move into our action items. Our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Draft minutes of the April 2nd Finance and Administration Committee meeting were included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the committee? No, I'll take a recommendation, please.
Recommend consent.
Thank you. Our next 3 action items this evening are for consideration of an ordinance for tax increment financing at 5101 Johnson Drive, along with an ordinance establishing the 5101 Johnson Drive Community Improvement District and a resolution of intent for IRBs at 5101 Johnson Drive, all from Laura Smith.
Thank you. Apparently I'm batting close to 1,000 this evening. That was Channel 4 who was here for the Unleash or the SUP for Playful Pack. And they were assuming we had flipped the meeting time. So yeah, sorry. Well, they're going to go back and watch the video. You may still have it. I think I shared with the council, they had reached out last night and I shared a link to the packet and all that. So I think that's why they wanted to just get a little bit of footage. They didn't understand that our committees were both committees were committees of the whole. So they were expecting sort of a changing of seats and folks up here. So I think we're all good. Miscommunicated with the developer and the press. So it's a good day, right? Anyway, here we are. It's almost 7:30. As you know, that the council recently passed resolution 1218 back in April, calling the public hearings for this project, both on the TIF project plan and the Community Improvement District or CID petition. That public hearing is scheduled for your May 21st legislative meeting. And so this is, as we move forward in that process on the committee agenda in advance of that, we bring forward all of the mechanics, if you will, of what you will consider at the conclusion of that public hearing. And if you're ready to act on those, they would be available. So we have Kevin Wimpy and Chanel Perez with Gilmore and Bell here in the audience. We have Bruce Kimmel is online and available for questions. And then we also have the developer and his representative in the audience with us as well. So what I think I'd like to do, the developer has a brief presentation. So I probably will invite them to share that first. So these 3 separate action items, which will ask you to make a determination about passing on to the agenda on the 21st, probably have kind of a combined discussion of all of those pieces together. So we'll ask the developer to make their presentation. Then late today, we uploaded a memo from Mr. Kimmel to the packet. You may or may not have had a chance to review it. So I'll ask him to kind of walk through that with you all, and then we'll have the opportunity to answer any other questions that you have on the TIF, the CID, or the IRBs related to the sales tax exemption. So with that, I would invite, I don't know, you?
I will.
Yeah,
Thank
Kurt
you.
Kurt Peterson with Polson-Helling.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening, Mayor and council members, and in this context, committee members. And will I have a click or will I ask for a click at the right moment? Okay, that's perfectly fine with me. Thank you for the help. I'm here in the capacity as representative for the developer, which is Mission 101 LLC. Dan Carr is the owner of Mission 101, which I think everyone had a chance to meet, which is a way of saying that this rarely happens, but Dan is not available tonight, although this is a top priority for him. These things happen. So you're stuck with me, but I will say, just to remind everybody who Dan is, because he's the principal, the one behind all this. Dan has many decades in real estate development in Kansas City. He's based on the plaza. He's known for two things. He's known for all of the buildings he builds for the federal government across the country. And he's also known for all his retail developments that he's done across our region, including in Liberty at the Liberty Triangle is always one of my favorite because it's such large scale and was just a smashing success. So Dan is not with us, but he's with us in the past and he'll be here at future meetings. I do have a good, I won't say replacement, but good wingman, which is David Hickman. He's the owner's representative that will help see this project to completion. And he is especially focused on a key component right now, which is leasing. And that's one of his expertise here in the back, raising his hand there. That's Mr. David Hickman. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Just a quick reminder, we won't dwell on any of this too much, but just to get our juices flowing on what we know, this is the former Wild Oats building, Johnson Drive and Roland Drive. It is empty and it's been that way for a couple decades. Dan loves Mission, as he was able to tell you, and he is just somewhat intrigued with this building, having seen it in this state for some time. So he took the opportunity to not only do what most of our clients and developers do, which is put something in their contract and see if you can get the zoning done and whatever you need to be. He just said, this is an opportunity. You all know it's been hard to acquire this building for some time. He just bought it, and he bought it near the end of last year. Now he'd really like to improve the building in a way that's memorable, in a way that is consistent with the vision and what's happening on Johnson Drive, as opposed to something less. So that's why we're here tonight. Next slide, please. Next slide would be great. Actually, back to the site plan right there. Thank you. So the building is approximately 22,000 square feet. Our vision is to demise it into two parts. You can see tenant B and tenant A. I'll call the east side of that tenant A slightly bigger. As you can see, about 13,000 feet. That'll be anchor tenant. And then you have the other tenant just to the west. We've spent months pursuing our anchor, which is at this moment confidential. Who that is, we're pursuing them, but I will say this about them. They are a regional brew pub with a full service restaurant with a focus on outdoor enjoyment and beverages and food, as you'll see as I describe the plan in a moment. And we can call them tenant A or the anchor tenant. Next slide, please. So the vision is to take this building, which needs a lot of work. I think some of you have firsthand knowledge as you've seen inside. I mean, a lot of work, just down to the studs. And to put extensive outdoor dining areas, we can go to the next slide, please. Extensive outdoor dining areas, some covered, some not. And then parking lot improvements, street trees, street lights, et cetera, meaning you will walk up to this and it will be befitting of the city of Mission and what we're doing in Johnson. And so giving you a little bit of sense on the screen, this is looking from Johnson Drive to the south. So you can see that the anchor tenant has the title brewery. You can see that the other tenant is on the right of the screen. Other things you can see, in some ways it's complicated, but in some ways it's helpful. See, and the drop down is showing you how the patio would come out and there'd be a place for tables and gathering. And then as we go to the next slide, you'll get a view that looks back to the west, and you'll see the same thing as kind of that wrap on the right side of the screen. The building wraps around to the side. You have all those roll-up doors you saw on the other side, and you have a whole nother patio area. So look at the drop down with landscaping and tables and places to gather. So that gives you a sense for what we'd like to do. I mean, just transform this old building and bring it back to wonderful new life. So once we land the anchor tenant, because we have not landed them, we will focus on leasing that west side of the building, the other tenant. We really haven't focused on that because so much of that, even that tenant's going to want to know what's going right next to them. But for expectations, it pretty much can't be a restaurant. It can be any other kind of retail just because we can't park it. Restaurants always require more parking, and we'll need the parking that we're providing for this anchor tenant. So like I said, we don't have the lease signed yet with the brew pub. It's a very competitive situation. We believe we're down to in competition with one other site, which is one very nearby city, we believe. It also is in confidentiality. But what we've been told is we need to show them that we are ready, which part of that means having the public incentives in place. So it's a little bit painful, both for y'all because we take time doing this, and for us because we take time and money, but we think it's worth it, because if you don't try in life, you're never, you can't get to the success part. So to be clear, we do understand that if for some reason we go through all this, and if we're successful in receiving the public-private partnership we're asking for, and we're not able to land this specific anchor tenant, Dan owns the building. This is his vision. And if we can't find a replacement, and by the way, there are other regional brew pubs, and if we can get something just like it, and the language and the agreement that will eventually be before you, the development agreement, and if it fits it, then we'll just move forward with that. If not, we will come back. We will have to come back contractually. We'll come in front of the committee. We'll come in front of the full council, and we'll say, what do you think about this replacement tenant? But that's all I want to talk about with respect to that, because we focus on the end zone and we're trying to get this tenant right now. So that is our goal. The incentive request, if you don't mind going to 2 slides forward. On the screen, that's a very brief summary of the 3 tools that we're asking you to consider. The first is tax increment financing. Y'all know you have the existing TIF, so this is just there's some technicalities. Kevin Wimpy would tell me that I'm going too fast, but we're going to go high level. It's an existing TIF. We're just asking for a TIF plan area for this to capture its own real property tax increment that's generated over the current base valuation for the building. The second tool is to add an additional sales tax on any taxable sales that would happen at the building. Now, you may see on the screen 2%, and some of you may say, that's a little more than we're used to seeing. The statute allows you to go up to 2%, but you can certainly do less. The reason we arrived at that is we truly were trying to bridge the gap. Man, this is expensive to do that to this building, et cetera. While Dan is excited, he also doesn't want to lose money on the project. So we kind of backed into what percentage we would need. The reason that oftentimes we can do something less than 2% is because we're not dealing with brew pubs. Brew pubs, while they would have a lot of sales of food, which is taxable, and Cokes and tea and what have you, as you all know, in Kansas, alcohol is a different type of tax, and CIDs only attached to actual sales tax. So that's how we ended up with the 2%. The last tool is industrial revenue bonds, and it would be merely to provide the sales tax exemption savings on construction materials. And because it's an existing building, it helps us with the labor too under Kansas law. That is a very fast summary of the tools that are being requested. The last slide I wanted to put up was just to give you a sense of what does that look like. And it can go one more slide, please. Thank you. In terms of actual numbers. So it's everything I just said, but it puts it in the form of a budget or a sources and uses. You can see a total project cost estimated at this point of 12 million. And as you look from left to right, you can see $618,000 of tax increment financing, CID of $977,000, and the balance being private. One thing I always like to point out in these contexts is this is a pay-as-you-go, a pay-go situation. So Mr. Carr, Dan, takes all the risk if he's able to move forward, meaning he has to do all this, even if you all approve the development agreement. And then over the course of 20 and 22 years, if the business does well and generates CID sales tax and property tax, he'll get paid over time with interest on those amounts. But no guarantees by the city, no bonds, nothing like that. And the last time I wanted to point out is small at the bottom of the screen, the metric we oftentimes look at, which is what is the developer asking for in a ratio as incentives to total estimated project spend. And you can see it's about 13%, which is pretty moderate across cities, and I think in Mission as to what has been granted in the past. So I wanted to put that on the screen for you. With that, you may have a lot of questions, and between me and if there's David type questions, we'd love to answer them now or later if you'd like tonight.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura. Did we have other presentations that we wanted to go through related to this first before we do go into
I
questions?
think it might be most efficient if you have some questions of Mr. Peterson or Mr. Hickman, go ahead and ask those, and then we'll transition to Mr. Kimmel.
Great. I'll just go down the line. Debbie?
Square footage of the tenant that you're seeking that you can't convey to us?
It will fit in that. I'm rounding here when I say this. We can put the slide back to the exact number, about 13,000 square feet.
How much parking?
Ooh, exact stalls, you're gonna stump me on that. But our architect, Scott Sloggy, who I know many of you have seen his work, he has worked on exactly how many spaces would be available. I'd have to look, I'd have to get with him though to answer that question. I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. If you're asking what's required versus I know what he's trying to fit and plan, that's what I could, but you, yeah, you would know that answer to that question.
Parking based on seating available.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Wanda.
It seems to me that the reason Whole Foods left there was because of rodent infestation. So you're gonna put a restaurant in close to a place that, what are you gonna do about the rodents potential? Have you thought about that?
I would say it's funny. I don't know that's funny, but just growing up here forever, I don't know how we all know about that. I've always heard
Well,
about that too.
I'm not sure that the wild oats had rodents or any sort of infestation on a regular basis. So at the time that they closed and had been vacant for some period of time, and I think as they were sort of clearing things out of the building, there was, as I recall, sort of one-time mass exodus of some rodents from that building. And that, at least as I understand it in my tenure here, has sort of grown into somewhat of an urban legend relative to that building.
Area that developed that.
Well, I think that the vacancies on the Gateway site and surrounding properties probably contributed to that, because the demolition of the mall and the vacation of the Wild Oats property occurred in and around the same time. So I don't think there's much, I don't think Mr. Peterson or Mr. Hickman tell you there's much left, not much left inside the building.
I was gonna say, by the time we even get started to add back, we're all the way down to nothingness, and rodents don't like to be around nothingness. You know, there has to be attractive things in there.
We haven't had any complaints that I'm aware of since that Wild Oats first left that building back in probably 2006 of anybody complaining about rodents in and around that area.
Any additional questions? Yeah, Leah.
Not really a question. I'm just super excited for something to happen in that space.
Mm-hmm.
It's been vacant
a
a
little
really
bit.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Ben.
Do you, or Brian, do you know, are you all seeking a greater amount of parking that would be required by the code? Or do you know off the top of your head?
I'm not super crisp on that.
Okay. Just checking.
I know people smarter than me, meaning that our design people that Dan has employed are looking at all that. I just don't have that off the top of my head.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Yeah. I'm just thinking about a place that serves alcohol being kind of a driver of vehicle traffic is just a concern of mine that I'll keep my eye on throughout this.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's this anonymous or whatever, this building, this restaurant. Now, is that going to be family? Is it going to be moderate amount of money? What kind of draw is this going to have? Because it's in a perfectly wonderful spot. It truly is going to be a good location.
Because it literally is a restaurant. It's not somewhere you'd go to have a drink and, oh, by the way, they might have some appetizers. It's a restaurant that happens to have, it's a brew pub. So it has really good adult beverages too. And so it attracts everybody. It's a wide scope type place, not a narrow, sports bar or just a family place. It's really, it appeals to a wide audience. I think I would just say this, it's in looking at the menu, and it's what you would kind of expect. You'd sit down, you wouldn't go, wow, that's expensive, or wow, how can they offer prices that low? It's what you'd expect. Moderate.
Yeah, as a parent of a small child, like brew pubs tend to be like the place to go with kids. So that's kind of like it's like sanctuary. Well, it's just, I mean, it's always like, yeah, it's always like kid friendly and like they're welcome there, although parents are there drinking libations and things like that. But yeah, so I'm also, like Leah said, really excited to see some development here, possible development. And yeah.
I had a question that's sort of maybe a mix for you and for Bruce, our financial advisor, who will be up next. But this one's a little unique since the tenant isn't secured yet in terms of having a fully formed pro forma or anything like that. I assume there are estimates that your project budget's based on and sort of expectations to hit those CID numbers that you're counting on. But do you have experience with other projects? Sort of, this is new for us, not having that fully fledged pro forma to deal with. And I feel reassured because that city contribution would be capped, the amount would be capped sort of regardless of what
That's right.
would happen. But I was just wondering if you've had similar projects or with a mystery
The honest
tenant.
answer is we've had across all industry types of projects we do.
Sure.
Certainly, I know, bear with me, I won't make it long, but just to give you a real answer, there's other types of projects that are more likely to be, we call it spec, right? You literally don't have your use yet.
Yeah.
Industrial would be an example.
Okay.
But even then, you kind of know the market for rents and et cetera. Retail, it's true. I mean, retail is so hard to do these days. How many new retail or even completely refurbished retail do you see? Not very much, because the economics are tough. So I'm going to say, this is more unusual, but Dan's up to the task. I mean, this is taking him time and money to pursue this tenant. The good news is, in working with Mr. Kimmel, because we have done a lot of preliminary work with him, we're not confidential to the brew pub and they're not confidential to us, meaning we all know we're down to terms. It's just, we have a competitive site who's negotiating terms. So we were able to plug those terms into our modeling to figure out what we need. When I talked about the CID being 2%, shipped it all to Mr. Kimmel. And that's where we ended up. So while we don't know it for sure, we know a lot. It's not like a true speculative. I don't know who the tenant would be. I don't know what the rent would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just sort of wanting to kind of lay my position out there a little bit. Typically, I think with TIF on a project that's not dramatically transforming the site towards our sort of long-term land use goals, I might not be so warm on the idea. However, I think as noted in some of the materials in the packet, you're also not doing a major transformation that's going to make this huge tax increment. So it sort of balances itself out. That makes sense to me. And in general, I like the contributions being made to the periphery of the site with the trees and just kind of making it a nicer area to be. So I've sort of been chewing on this one for a while, but I think all in all, I feel it's a net positive to the city.
Debbie, yeah.
I also appreciate you coming. I think this is a benefit for all people across Mission. It doesn't just benefit one group of people. I think people can go to eat, they can go get a drink, they can do the entertainment zone. And I think you're actually looking at what's best for the whole community.
Thank you.
Doesn't look like we have any additional comments. So thank you.
Thank you.
Why not? Now, Mr. Kimmel, if you would like to just sort of step through your memo that was provided to the council late this afternoon and answer any questions, as I know you will.
Sure. Thank you, Laura and council. Bruce Kimmel with Elders. So a lot of what we covered in our brief memo was already discussed by Mr. Peterson and all of you. But just to sort of hit some highlights, you're familiar with what the developer is asking for in terms of tax increment from the development itself or the renovation itself, the 2% CID, up to a maximum reimbursement of $1.6 million. I should note that the draft development agreement does include a 5.5% interest rate on that, which is pretty conventional. Sometimes that interest rate will vary, but the idea is that the developer is taking on debt and or putting their own equity into the project. And so in addition to using the TIF and CID to reimburse the actual costs of acquisition and construction, you would also be funding some amount of interest as that balance is being drawn down every year as those TIF and CID dollars are reimbursed to the developer. I think we covered the development budget, so I won't go over that, but I will note that the 13.2% that this maximum reimbursement would be, we would say is probably moderate to even on the low side of what we would see on retail projects like this. Retail is, as Mr. Peterson noted, really tough. There's just not a lot of big expensive projects happening, either brand new development or renovation like this. And there's a fair amount of risk, right? We could have another pandemic. We could have other economic uncertainty. We already have economic uncertainty, but that could, change in some way. And so I would say that this is absolutely sort of an appropriate ask, I guess, in terms of as a percentage of the development budget. But of course, that is up to you to decide whether and how to participate. We would note that in the next couple of paragraphs in the memo discuss this. We did receive a development budget, a pro forma, some decent details on that. However, I guess our qualms about providing return on investment analysis and other types of details along the lines of what we've done for other projects is just really hinging on the fact that we haven't yet seen, confirmation of that tenant and what they're prepared to pay in terms of leasing revenues. This is all information that's coming from the developer and his team. And we have no reason to believe that any of that has been misrepresented in any way, shape, or form. But it is a little bit of a different situation than from like a multifamily housing development where we're having a developer, actually providing us all of the details and saying, this is what we're going to be doing. Here you've got a little bit of a disconnect between the developer, between us, the developer, and that anchor tenant. I want to stress that none of this is reason in our mind to say we can't move forward. If you decide that, that's absolutely your prerogative. I'm just wanting to make clear that there is sort of a distinction in our ability to really evaluate with certainty or more certainty the economics of this deal versus some of the other ones that you've looked at. And then finally, I would just note that if you do decide to move forward, we do think that these tools are appropriate to the task. As one of you just mentioned, the TIF isn't likely to be a huge amount. Sorry if you can see my cat. She just jumped up and decided to come into the screen or trying to. The TIF isn't going to be a huge driver because typically Johnson County just doesn't provide that much additional value from renovation as opposed to a greenfield or a vacant site redevelopment. But there will be incremental value, of course, and we think that would be appropriate for the city to capture that and to use that towards this purpose. And then similarly with the CID, as you're all aware, these are self-imposed taxes. Of course, it's the public that ultimately pays them, but the developer and its tenant really need to be confident that that will not hurt their economic activity and viability. And so typically we see cities be a little more flexible, maybe in their consideration of CID as opposed to some other public incentives. So I think that's where I would like to leave it. I'd be happy to answer any questions about what we've seen and what our experiences with other types of projects. I do think that, again, I would just say that given the difficulties in the development market in general and for retail in specific, if you like this project or the idea of this project, I think you are definitely within a realm of reasonableness, if you will, to be considering the incentive request from this developer. It's just it's a tough environment, and I think you could even in the absence of concrete financial information, I think you would be well within your wheelhouse to provide incentives along these lines for this kind of a project.
Great, thank you, Bruce. Do we have any questions from the committee? Yes.
Bruce, I think you did say we could characterize the return as moderate. Is there any more detail you could provide on that? The rate of return?
Yeah, well, so what I meant to actually say, and I forgive me if I misspoke, is that the incentives as a percentage of the overall investment
Oh, okay.
is pretty moderate to even
it.
maybe on the light side of what you might otherwise see. And I think it's great and appropriate that you're really targeting these incentives to land acquisition or building acquisition costs as well as construction costs. The return on investment, I'm not comfortable really saying yes, we're in a reasonable range. I mean, the numbers that the developer provided are definitely not showing any windfall profits, and there's a lot of risk there. Again, with
Okay.
leasing this space to a restaurant, right? Restaurants have a pretty high rate of failure, although this particular tenant seems to have a very good track record. So I would say that the projected rate of return as it is not unreasonably high in any way, shape, or form for this
Okay.
type of project.
Thank you, Bruce.
And I would just point, again, this is a little bit unique. We've spent the last several years really looking at multifamily projects in particular. Later on your agenda, you'll be talking about termination of a TIF district that did have a retail component, but I would also point to Cornerstone Commons, which was exclusively a CID. And if we think about the vacancy of the restaurants there, I mean, that's a pay-as-you-go project, so the developer is not they're not hitting their estimates for when that project was approved. So I think there is definitely a point to be considered about the risk being assumed, especially on a smaller scale retail project like this.
Do we have any additional questions or comments? I do not see any. Oh, Leah, sorry.
Well, and this is more for the developers. So if the current tenant that we're wooing, you're wooing, doesn't quite come through, I mean, knowing that restaurants do have a higher risk of failure, what is kind of plan B? Is there another specific one in mind, or will the developer be very particular in who they choose, looking at track records and that sort of thing?
I'm going to take a first pass at that. I think that on one hand, if well, I will say that, and then I'll lose my train of thought because I'm consistent with tonight, if nothing else. I think, as Mr. Peterson described earlier, this development agreement, which I'll ask Mr. Wempe to kind of step through some of the high points, is very specific that these particular incentives are tied to them securing the tenant that they are currently pursuing, or one that would fit within that definition included in the development agreement.
So something that had a long track record that had been successful in other places,
Well,
that sort of thing?
Well, and again, I'll ask Mr. Wempe to kind of touch on that specific definition. If they are not successful in securing that tenant, they would need to come back to the city council if they want incentives. If they wanted to move a project forward without incentives, then they have a lot more latitude, right? But if they don't have their preferred tenant or one very similar, they will be back, as Mr. Peterson said, in front of you, renegotiating any incentives on this project.
Thank you.
So with that, so again, 3 component pieces: tax increment financing. So on the 21st, you would consider, hold a public hearing, and then you would consider an ordinance that was included in your packet, which would divide the Rock Creek TIF district. Again, this is just portioning off so the project boundaries match, approving the project plan for the redevelopment district, and approving the execution of a development agreement. On the CID side, you have a public hearing, you have consideration of an ordinance that would basically adopt or impose the additional sales tax. And then you would have a resolution of intent to issue the IRBs for the sales tax exemption. And the development agreement, which again, I'll ask Mr. Wempe to come up and walk through, is really the piece that will tie all three of those components together. And as you all are familiar, that development agreement is really the contract between the developer and the city for all things and all terms related to that. So Mr. Wempe, if you're available. Oh, you have.
All right, thank you, Laura. Yeah, good evening, Mayor, Council, Kevin Wimpy with Gilmore and Bell, the city's bond counsel, also joined by my colleague tonight, Chanel Perez. Everyone in front of me has been very thorough and accurate and left very little on the plate. And you've had the occasion to consider several development agreements recently. So I'll just try to fill in the few of the negative spaces or high points here that make this development agreement unique. So to start by rehashing again, just a pay-go project. So pay as you go, meaning developer privately finances everything and then is reimbursed over time. So no bonds being issued that are secured by CID or TIF revenues here. The TIF is only capturing property tax, and so regular sales taxes will flow through to the city and other taxing jurisdictions that impose sales taxes. A $1.6 million incentive cap is in the aggregate for both TIF and CID revenues, plus the interest carry cost that was mentioned by Mr. Kimmel. The development agreement also imposes a construction schedule like you're used to seeing that requires commencement about a year from now and completion about 2 years from now in May of 27. You know, I'll note that I don't want to speak on behalf of Mr. Peterson or his client, but the CID commencement date that's proposed is the beginning of next year. So I do think their plans are to get underway and be complete well in advance of those timelines, if that's any indication. Also, the TIF's being activated upon approval. And so the 20-year clock you've heard us talk about before to provide for capture and repayment of those TIF costs would sort of put them on the clock, so to speak, to complete and maximize their return on the TIF. So they're very incentivized in the pay-go aspect to move quickly, assuming you choose to proceed. The last thing I'll touch on that's unique to this deal is the lease with the anchor tenant that's been discussed. That's comes into the development agreement in a couple of places. And first of all, evidence of that lease being executed is a condition precedent to any incentive revenues being dispersed to the developer. And then second, they're required to show evidence of execution of that lease within 6 months of approval of the development agreement, or the city would have termination rights. So that is kind of the key thing that stands out about this agreement as we're focused on the anchor tenant here. Aside from that, the rest of the covenants and conditions in here are pretty customary compared to what you've seen recently, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? We do.
So the cap that you mentioned that applies to all forms of incentives on the project, or?
Correct.
Okay, and beyond, so once that cap is reached, then the funds would continue to accumulate in the TIF? Or how would that work?
The agreement's worded to provide the city the option at that point to either continue capturing TIF and utilizing it for the city's eligible purposes,
Right.
or the city would have the option to terminate the TIF, Community Improvement District, and allow those funds to flow through the taxing jurisdictions.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Any additional questions or comments from the committee? No. Thank you. Is that the last presentation we have on this
Yes, it is.
topic? So given that, I would entertain a recommendation for all three of them.
Regular agenda?
I'm sorry.
Do they have to be regular agenda?
I believe so. Well, you're going to hold a public hearing.
Oh,
So you'll hold the public hearing and then these items would typically appear later on the regular Finance and Administration Committee agenda.
Recommend we take all three to regular agenda.
Thank you. Our next action item this evening is for consideration of an ordinance terminating the Mission Crossing redevelopment TIF district from Justin Carroll.
All right. Well, speaking of project plans and redevelopment and everything, this is what happens when you get through one of those. So this is an item we've talked about a little bit, and now we're finally bringing it in front of you to officially terminate the Mission Crossing redevelopment TIF district. So this was a TIF that was approved back in January of 2010. And, you know, we're referring to the area over right by Metcalf with Chick-fil-A and the Wellstone building and everything over there in that little square. When that agreement was originally approved, it was 100% TIF increment as well as the additional 1% TIF sales tax that would go to the developer for that project. That also included a CID TIF or a CID district as well as part of the incentive package for that project. Once that was complete, as is standard, so then the developer submits their submitted expenses that are required for a pay-as-you-go reimbursement. They submitted expenses totaling about $6 million. And of that amount, about 3.3 million was determined to be eligible TIF expenses that the city certifies, and then we can start reimbursing with the TIF revenues. The first reimbursement for that project went out in March of 2013. And just, we talked about, as Kevin mentioned, the standard 20-year TIF clock. But with this project, the good news is that they beat the projections and it paid off within 12 years. And so once that projection was hit, the city sent a letter, which wasn't part of your packet, that went out to the developer recognizing this and telling them that they've exceeded their incentive amounts they've paid off the incentive amounts for the TIF, and that the city would be moving forward with this action. And so just a couple kind of fun facts for this project. When the TIF district was established, the base parcel value there was $434,750. The most recent valuation for that whole area, so it's now multiple parcels are over there, but it's about $4 million in total valuation. The city estimates that we'll see an average of about $70,000 per year in additional property tax revenues that'll now start flowing through to the city. And that's just the city of Mission's portion. In the action item summary, you'll see all the other taxing jurisdictions as well that'll start receiving revenues from this action. And then removing the TIF district also takes away that 1% TIF sales tax piece of it. And so the estimate with that is about approximately $140,000 the city would expect to see in those revenues, the sales tax revenues piece of it. Then the last thing to note with this item is just that the CID, there are still eligible reimbursable expenses for the CID component of this. So that will still remain in place for now. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Justin. Do we have any questions on the committee? Yes, Debbie.
So length of CID.
22 years is the standard for CID.
Did I catch that number right? That's roughly $210,000 in increased revenue for the city?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I was probably shortchanging it, saying 200, but yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh.
And I would just comment here that when we approved this was there had been an approval for Gateway, but obviously nothing had been built. So this was the first really negotiated TIF project. And the only one since then that we have also included the TIF sales tax component with, which is part of what really accelerated this and allowed it to do that. But the tenants were not identified at the time that this project was put together. And in fact, it anticipated, as we were going back and reading through the initial project plans, it anticipated a hotel and some office space. We knew it was to be mixed use. So that is definitely a success story. As a part of that, we also, when we talk about now, what we look for in terms of sustainability or attainable housing or other things as we negotiate incentives at the time, we actually negotiated as a part of that agreement that the developer dedicated what is now Legacy Park. So that land became green space. And they also contributed, I think about $100,000 to make improvements to that park. So that was something we were looking for at the time. So again, I think we have an established history of looking at what do we value, what are we looking for at the time, and how do we incorporate that into a request for a public-private partnership.
Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, can I get a recommendation on this, please?
Recommend acceptance on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Our next action item this evening is for consideration of an ordinance and resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds from Justin Carroll and Laura Smith.
All right, great news. You're almost done hearing me talk about bonds. So the finish line is almost near. So just as a reminder, we've talked about this last month. You all approved the set sale that this is the next step in that process. So just to help cash flow the two major projects that we've got, primarily those two projects that are occurring next year, the Johnson Drive project about $13.5 million price tag, and the Rock Creek Channel repairs is about $9.3 million price tag. And then in addition to funding for those projects, we are including 5 police vehicle replacements and the necessary upfitting equipment for those vehicles. And as a reminder, that for that component, the vehicles, that is on a 4-year repayback, which is what our normal lease purchase would be, whereas the other one are the more standard 10-year bond repayments. And so just kind of as a reminder that we've gone through all this, and Bruce Kimmel with Ellers has done kind of the cash flow analysis and looked at everything with our capital funds and to pay for these bonds, and determined that there are kind of adequate funding and revenues in there for that to dedicate to the repayment of these bonds. And so for those that are kind of unfamiliar with the process and kind of what the next steps are going to look like, so the bond sale will occur on the morning of May 21st. And then what will happen is we'll come with a special meeting that night for the council to kind of take some actions to wrap all this up. So we'll present the winning bid. And so then what the steps will look like is approve the winning bid, and Ellers will have all that information ready for you all. And then the ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance of those bonds. And then the last step is just approving the resolution for the form and details authorizing, directing the sale and delivery of the bonds. So those are the kind of the 3 steps with that. And so lastly, just related to this, so the official statement is still kind of being finalized, and that'll be published prior to the meeting. And then tomorrow, actually, we will have the ratings call with Standard & Poor's to confirm the city's bond rating at that time.
Great. Thank you, Tristan. Any questions from the committee? Debbie?
Comment.
Comment.
I'd like to take the Mission Crossing success story and take it off the consent and bring it up, because I'd like to see people that see that we've done something with the project. It's come to fruition and we're getting money back. That's good.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So we have a preemptive recommendation for the regular agenda. Any other comments? No? Okay. Regular agenda it is.
For this one too.
This one will be on, you'll remember always at the top of your agenda, there's a section for issuance of notes and bonds. And we will finally have something to include in that section. So as Justin mentioned, Mr. Kimmel will present the results of the bond sale that occurred earlier in the day. And then we'll just go ahead and take action to conclude the remaining necessary steps.
Perfect. That brings us to our final action item this evening, which is for consideration of phase 1 of adjustments to police compensation, also from Laura Smith.
Thank you. You'll remember that back in February, we had a work session where we talked about a number of things, including some of the challenges that we face related to recruitment and retention for our police officers. We walked through several challenges and concerns, including the fact that we're seeing a shrinking pool of applicants in general. It's not entirely new, but it was exacerbated by the pandemic and certainly some of the nationwide anti-police protests that sprang up after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. There are a lot of people that reconsidered whether law enforcement was the profession for them. That shrinking of an applicant pool and the recruitment challenges result in surrounding agencies of all sizes increasing pay at what has felt like a breakneck pace for the last several years. And they're frequently offering hiring bonuses. And as you know, we've talked about the turnover that we've had in 2023 was particularly, I think we annually, our turnover has been about 5%. And it was much more significant in 2023. I think we lost 7 or 8 officers in one fell swoop. The council has made significant investments, not only in compensation for the police department, but across the organization. But the market and the real-time experiences that we're having now tell us that we're lagging once again, particularly with respect to police salaries. The challenge that you have there, and the department could certainly lower their standards, but the long recruitment and training period for sworn personnel can become even longer, and the vacancies can extend for even longer periods of time because the chief and his staff are really unwilling to compromise their standards. and just to simply get bodies here and fill the vacant positions. So in addition to that, we talked in February about how sometimes these longstanding vacancies or more constant turnover can really create stresses for the officers that are still with us. We've had to transition to 12-hour shifts as a result of the staffing challenges that we've experienced. There's required overtime to make sure we can hit required staffing minimums. We have officers that may be unable to take vacation or holidays when they would like to because their presence is required to meet those minimum staffing levels. I would say that we have absolutely, and I think the council really to a person back in February echoed this as well, that you recognize that we definitely have a committed department and staff. They are committed to the organization and the community. But they will tell you that and articulate that the factors that make us less competitive in recruitment and retention are competitive pay and our facility. So we after that presentation, we said we would go back and really start to look at how do we create a sustainable implementation strategy that allows the department to really maintain high standards and the level of service that our residents have come to accept. Being able to recruit in a really highly competitive environment is important, but I think if you would ask the chief, and I would concur, that the retention is maybe even more important. It's the experience and the knowledge that our tenured officers have that I think really contributes to making our community a safer place in a more holistic way. They have proven over time that they have the skills and the compassion to execute their responsibilities fairly and oftentimes in very high stress situations. In addition, we know the costs associated with having to hire, train, outfit new officers then can be significantly more than pay increases over time. So what we are bringing forward this evening is a recommendation to implement what we've called phase one, which is going to be a significant number. And I'll get to that here in just a moment. But it's really important for us to make meaningful progress in the short term and then continue to develop and refine a plan for how we're going to support that. The chief believes that the market surrounding law enforcement pay may be stabilizing. But we certainly have fallen behind in recent years. And our objective in making the phase one recommendation is to provide that meaningful increase to sworn personnel for all of our hourly employees. So that would be police officer to the rank of lieutenant effective June 1st in an effort to retain the quality staff while we really refine this plan as we move through the 2026 budget process. The estimated increases in phase one, we anticipate will range anywhere from 2 to 20% for individual members of the department. That seems like a big range, but it's very dependent as we look at, and I think we talked in February about the focus group that we had created within the department and their desire to move toward a step plan. And so that implementation in this phase one implementation has a wide variation because we're trying to position people appropriately based on their tenure within that step plan. So there's approximately 26 of the 29 sworn personnel that would be impacted with phase one. The chief, deputy chief, and a captain are excluded at this time to give us that focus, and we will come back and they will certainly be part of that conversation as we move forward. As we've looked at that, we're asking for and recommending to the council that you consider approving expenditure authority up to $250,000 to realign salaries effective June 1st for those positions. And then also to increase the starting pay for a police officer from the current, which is just shy of $55,000 to $63,000. And there was a late addition to your packet, but there is a table that kind of shows where we fall currently and where we would fall with this increase. There are a couple of agencies, the asterisk that are noted. So we know that Lenexa and Merriam, and we believe Overland Park are all currently in the process of considering additional compensation adjustments. Now, $250,000 is a lot of, is a big expenditure. I will tell you that phase one implementation, we believe will get close to 75% of those impacted personnel where they need to be, with some minor adjustments that will need to come forward as part of phase two, or a smaller number. So our goal really is to bite off this kind of big chunk initially, and then understand the implications. As we've talked about, and as we really start into our budget conversations in earnest, we're going to have to look at the ability to sustain both the compensation side, and how do we put together a plan to look at a new facility into the future. So those will be really critical pieces of our conversation. And so we would expect to come back to you probably in August, as we're wrapping up, have been through those budget discussions with the balance of that recommendation. So I think the question then I have, or Chief will tell you I always have, is where do we find that? I think there are a couple of places. That is, in the 2025 budget, we had anticipated making a lease payment on police vehicles. And so we had earmarked a little over $135,000 for that lease payment. With the bond issue that is moving forward at this time, we won't actually have a first debt service payment on those vehicles until 2026. So there's that money that's available immediately. We've talked about some of the additional sales tax and property tax revenues that might be available. And I think we have the capacity and, quite honestly, the obligation to make this phase one implementation happen as soon as we possibly can. And then again, look at how do we do this, and continuing to work with the members of the department who've been on that focus group. And part of what we would anticipate bringing back in August would also be that very specific step plan. One of the challenges that we're really trying to work through, and I'm sure the chief could speak more to this, is as a small agency, eliminating the overlap between positions and ranks is challenging, but important. So oftentimes we have people who may spend the majority of a career with us as a police officer, or a police officer two in particular, because there are just limited promotional opportunities. So we want to make sure that as we do that, we aren't creating sort of that overlap that potentially disincentivizes people to look at promotions when they do become available. Anything you want to add to that, Chief?
And I think that aspect of it's really important as far as where the ranges fall. Matter of fact, our last sergeant process, we had several people eligible that didn't put in for it because when it wasn't that big of a financial benefit, but it also would kind of reset their schedule. They bid their shifts by seniority, and if now all of a sudden you go from the senior officer to the junior sergeant, you're not getting the same good quality days off or what works best for your family. So those are the things that I feel are important, and I know I know that the officers appreciated your support and all the words you said in our February meeting. Many, and I believe probably every person in the department watched that and had a great feeling afterwards. So appreciate that.
Thank you both. Looks like we have Debbie. You have a comment?
Do we currently have a nighttime differential?
No, that's been brought up before. The problem is that where's that cutoff, especially when you're on a 12-hour shift and trying to figure out, okay, these hours are this much and these hours are this much. It makes it a little bit challenging to have a differential in the position that we're in currently.
Ben?
I think you said it best, Laura, when you said we have the capacity and the obligation. Every time this topic comes up, I like to say that I think we hold our department to a high standard, and in return, they give us nothing but excellent performance and service. And I think it's a certain kind of difficult to do a difficult job and not be at sort of a market competitive pay. I think in order to continue sort of that relationship is it's important that we do this sooner than later, and having the opportunity, the capacity in front of us to make the numbers work for phase one, I'm all for it.
I'll go down the line. Yeah, Mary and then Wanda. Yeah,
Oh,
whoever.
sorry. Yeah, I think a city can only be as healthy as the staff that represents it. And if making this change, although, the numbers look alarming at first, but really not, means like a healthy department and healthy officers representing and supporting and keeping our city safe. I'm absolutely in favor of making this work and making this happen, as Ben said, as quickly as we can, and as soon as we can. And I'm excited to even look at phase two as quickly as we can. So, yeah, thank you.
The tenure of these officers. How long have they been on the job?
You can take that. You have the handy dandy cheat
Yeah.
sheet.
So we have a wide variation of experience. So we have police officer 1 and police officer 2, and then goes to sergeant and then lieutenant. So the majority of our police officer 1s, our most senior police officer 1 is at the 7-year mark. But when we were more competitive, we were able to benefit from having some lateral transfers so that means they come from another department. You don't have to go through the police academy and the full, 12 to 16 week field training program. And so those salaries are sometimes higher, but our senior staff, I can't remember ever having more people that have been here over 20 years. Yes, we have 4.
Well, we can't guarantee it. I
Yeah.
can tell you that in conversations, both with, so when we initiated this conversation at the first of the year, we brought in a focus group and we really had officers who represented kind of every spectrum, different ranks. They appreciate the culture. And I think in February, we talked about, we were losing people who were getting $20,000, $30,000 pay increases to go to work in another agency. And it's very difficult to be frustrated with, our officers who are looking to support their families and advance those kinds of things. We aren't getting to that level, but I think that's also why you see the variation in this phase one of, there will be some people who have smaller increases because they have less tenure and they're earlier in that step plan. I think we ranged from 1 year to 21 years, I think is the highest. Your command staff, so you have 4 people who have over 20 years experience, 3 of whom aren't going to be impacted by phase one. So I think what they tell us, and the chief can reinforce this, is that they want to be here. They appreciate the culture, but the choices become increasingly difficult when they are transporting folks to the detention facility at Johnson County, and there are recruitment posters that say, if you're an officer with X number of years experience, here's what your starting salary would be. It's very, very competitive.
On staff with part-time people, is that possible?
Oh,
We have
Would
had,
that be more cost effective? Not that I don't think that they deserve a raise, I do,
yeah,
but can we augment?
part-time staff is very challenging to find and very challenging to fill where you need them to fill, because oftentimes they have a full-time job themselves, so they're only available at finite hours and times, and throwing them onto a midnight shift or something like that isn't going to work with their situation. So the departments that have had part-time officers, believe me, it's not a widely successful program.
I think the benefits piece too would be
difficult to hire, like, because if we're not providing benefits for part-time folks, that makes it difficult for them to want to take it.
Yeah, I mean, we get to the point if we are scheduling them for, typically our benefits eligible is 30 hours or more. So if you're at 30 hours and you're paying full benefits, you are, that margin to get to a full-time employee is actually pretty small. Anything else?
The other big thing is the training component of that. Part-time officers aren't required to have the same training that full-time officers are required through the state. And so we want to, whatever product we're going to put out there, we're going to put out the best that can go through all the training that we need them to go through.
Well, I guess though that when I look at the amount of crime that happens in Mission as compared to other places, I'm not saying that they don't deserve starting salaries. I just think that would somewhat be a draw for keeping you, that it, not only the climate, but also the fact that I wouldn't think that you're exposed to that much danger, but I could be wrong.
I think you would be surprised. I don't think you're talking about, weighing the difference between KCMO or Wyandotte County. But I think the chief and our
Or even
officers
Overland Park.
would, I don't know, you want to speak to that at all?
There are a lot of things that happen that are high risk, that are high stress, traumatic events that the officers witness on a fairly regular basis. So it's not, oftentimes you don't hear about all those things, and they're not newsworthy, or it was an event that happened and was resolved, but required some interesting stories from time to time.
I move that it be a consent. Can I do?
We've got a couple more comments. Sorry.
so-
Yeah, Cheryl, you had a comment? Yeah.
Yeah, and Laura, I'm really glad you brought up the facilities too, because we're not only competing for the salaries, but I know, isn't it Lenexa that just built new police facilities? And understand that police officers, yes, we do have the PAL Center, but they're not going to necessarily be able to go work out there because of the nature of their job. So I think that I'm glad that that's something that we're looking at for what we're doing in 2026. And I think it just needs to be front and center, because this alone is not going to cure that problem. Thank you.
Debbie.
Crime issue, they don't stop at the perimeter of Mission. When they're called, there may be 3 or 4 that end up in Overland Park and Lenexa and Marion, they're called all over. And because we have such members of the police force that have such integrity and they're really good at their jobs, they get called to do a lot of things that seem to be outside the purview of what you think that policemen do from this parameter to east, west, north, and south. They are called all over, and lots of things that they get involved in, including work at the school and work at health facility. I mean, they're all over the place. They really are. I wanted to mention, is there any way to look at a revenue source that we could take a percentage of the money we get from fines and tickets to go into a pool to help fund additional salaries?
I think what we have now is, although not specifically earmarked to that, all of that fine revenue goes into the general fund. And so effectively you could say that it is dedicated to that. One thing that I did fail to mention, I think we had a conversation about the county renewing their dedicated public safety sales tax, and we received notification last week of their intent to renew, which means we will continue to receive a portion of that, which is about $200,000. I think what the conversation, and the mayor will laugh at me because she teased me earlier today. I think we're going to have to look potentially at, in order to stabilize the compensation and address the facility issue, I think we're going to have to look at some other revenue enhancement options that can be specifically dedicated. And I think there are a variety of things where you have discretion in how we're doing things in particularly the general fund, whether that's related to cost recovery goals for the community center, whether that's related to property tax mills that are dedicated to streets. I mean, I think we have to come back and really take a more comprehensive look at our budget this year than maybe we have for the last, 4 or 5 years.
And just to clarify, I wasn't laughing
know
at
you weren't laughing.
discussing revenue
told me that
enhancements
was-
being a difficult conversation. I was pointing out that it sounded a little more like business speak than what
Yes,
you hear
than what I
typically out
usually
of
say.
Laura's mouth. Yes.
Revenue enhancements.
Just one more comment.
Mhm.
As we look forward to all these projects, whether it be apartments or pubs or whatever, we'd be naive to think in the next couple of years, we don't need to start adding police.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big piece of the conversation too, and looking at, and I do want to say something about the step plan and the size of the phase one, investment but the step plan that we're looking at, I mean, it takes a big chunk to get everybody placed appropriately. And some of you who've been around will remember that we've done this. We had a pretty big move in 2017. We had another one in 2021. We had another one in 2023 when we had some ARPA funds available. But once we transition to the step plan, the percentage increases between steps as people move through that step plan are really reasonable and very much in line with what the rest of the organization would be receiving as part of a merit increase annually. So it's difficult at initial implementation, but then if we can really keep up with that and create that long-term plan, we should be in good shape.
Great. There are no other comments. I will take a recommendation, please.
Recommend acceptance on the regular agenda, please.
Regular.
Great.
We do not have any discussion items this evening. Before we adjourn, are there any department updates for us other than what we covered in the previous
Do
committee?
you want to talk about your 2 events? Okay.
Hold up, so I don't get it wrong. And sorry, I didn't get a invitation out. These things both kind of came up. They're not necessarily our events, but we were asked to participate, and I want to make sure you're aware that we have a Coffee with the Cop Friday at Hy-Vee, 10 o'clock. Look forward to that. That's something that we haven't done since pre-pandemic, so 10 o'clock at Hy-Vee. And the sheriff's office having a touch a truck event that they asked us to come to. That is Saturday. I'm trying to find the time. And that is in conjunction with food pantry, raising money and I cannot find the email.
You talking this Saturday?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I just had it.
You're looking for
The time.
It's
10
Saturday the
to
10th, 10
noon
to
at the
noon.
county offices.
Yeah, 6,000 Lamar.
Mm.
So if we'll have probably our motorcycle and a police car there and
and it
bunch of-
says food pantry donations for Johnson County Aging and Human Services.
Yeah. So, and there'll be multiple agencies there with some of their vehicles and specialty vehicles as well.
You got it up on the Facebook, so you get credit for that.
Well, if I could find it on my email, I'd be better.
Thank you. And Robin, you said you didn't have nothing. Okay. Well, with that, it is now 8:31 p.m. and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee.